You're very welcome along to the Matchbook NFL podcast. Hard to believe we're at week 4 already. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined as always by Judah Forgtgang, and this week, once again, Doug Kezirian. Doug, we'll start with you. I mean, week 3 takeaways, NFL takeaways. Your takeaway last week was that there's parity amongst the league, and I guess there's no real standout performer. The Bills we were maybe talking off air, perhaps.
Yeah, and it was just a friendly reminder to us that every week in and week out, that you got to remember no team plays the same every week, right? The teams that look great one week are not going to necessarily duplicate that. I even talk about that from an being on air standpoint. The hardest thing to do in TV is to have a good show or a really good show, back-to-back shows. It's just the human, element to this. And what was it? 7 0-2 teams played on Sunday. 6 of them won and covered outright. And a lot of them as underdogs, right? Like the Carolina Panthers. And, they were facing, the Denver Broncos going into Tampa. And there were some quotes that really stood out to me, just ripping through some of them. Baker Mayfield, something like, you have to prepare like you're playing a playoff game every week or else this can happen. We got our butts kicked. Physicality-wise, execution, it's a good lesson for our team. Mike Evans, it does hurt. I feel like they wanted it more. A defensive back, Zion McCollum. I feel like from the very first snap of the ball that they were going, punching us in the face, firing off the ball, doing everything they can to win the game, and we were just kind of out there. I mean, that's the whole thing, and that's why the math is the larger sample size, because it's really hard to predict. But if you can sort of get in the head of some of these teams, teams will respond, and, we're going to see that. But it doesn't always work that way. The Titans stunk. We're losing wire to wire, and the Jaguars didn't show up even though they were quote unquote 0-2. So it's not a foolproof plan, but it is a friendly reminder when the dogs were barking on Sunday for sure.
Yeah, and you've got to factor in, like, you've obviously got the math, and they should be the predominantly most of your betting wise, but also you've got to factor in little things like that, and motivation, and teams not being up for games, and spots as well are huge, and Judah. But right, it's a reminder of the randomness of games, fragility of teams week on week, and it's just picking those spots and trying to get ahead of it before it just happens, and you go, yeah, of course that was always going to happen.
Yeah, so sometimes it's not even a matter of like, oh, of course this is going to happen, and just like underdogs that have closed at 6 or more points are 8-5 so far this season. Like, that's obviously not going to continue, but it's just a reminder that if you kind of cherry pick any small little sample here or there, like, there is just so much randomness, and oftentimes, like, there's a pattern to randomness in kind of a counterintuitive way, and it's like it can kind of diverge in both directions. I think this is a case where there's likely no. Maybe there's some pattern of like something that's happening behind the scenes, but it just kind of frames and contextualizes like how we got to go about approaching this league, and a reminder, like, never to overreact too much to 1 week's results. Things can get kind of crazy. I mean, like, the Rams had absolutely no business winning that game against the Niners. Like, a bunch of just like ridiculous things happened. And that is part of what makes this league so compelling and so fun, but is also, and it is just worth saying all the time, because it is like so innate in us humans to react to the thing we last saw and to the results, but that is not exactly the most predictive thing when looking ahead. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to predict what will happen.
Yeah, we're trying to predict exactly what will happen on NFL Sunday. So very much looking forward to getting the guys' thoughts. If you're new to the podcast, we generally cover 4 marquee games. I sort of throw a few games at the guys. A lot of any other bets, long shots and best bets. And that's it. Timestamps are available in the description wherever you're following or listening. All we ask is you'd like, follow, or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, and insights.matchbook.com. Full recap of all the guys' picks, and incidentally, Sam Farley has a £5 podcast money back special available on our social channels, and that won last week at around 5.25. So very worth checking that out. That was on the Ravens at Cowboys game. So we'll start with the Saints at the Falcons and take a look at the betting that we have on matchbook.com. You can currently back the Saints in and around 2.12, Falcons 184. Point spread sees Saints getting a 1.5 head start, and the total is around 41.5, 42.5. I'll start with you, Doug. You're sort of looking at the total for a game here, because obviously, look, the Saints were so good for the first couple of weeks, and I guess offensively, of course, it was very disappointing over the weekend.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so intriguing, because which version of the New Orleans offense are we going to see? We were taken back a little bit by the Saints when they were putting up all those points just because of Carr, but then they're like, well, it is explosive and they have some weapons. I wonder if, we hear it so often the NFL's a copycat league, blah, blah, blah. So I wonder if Vic Fangio, what he did with the Eagles last week, that the next team they face, Atlanta, can do it. And I like this Falcons defense. I think they have some playmakers, and it's a really tough team. And I'm expecting the under here, and it's low total. I mean, it's low total everywhere in the NFL, but that's the type of offense we're seeing. And I just think it's going to be one of those weird NFC South games where it's kind of like we saw in week 1 with the Steelers and Falcons, where it's going to be an odd number, 19-17, kind of one of those non-traditional football scores. And I think, Carr is not this elite NFL quarterback. And whatever Fangio is doing, stacking the box, pressuring him, I think there's going to be a lot more of that to come until he can prove otherwise. So there's a reason Carr's bounced around a little bit, and I'm going to have to ride a little bit of a leap of faith and think this Saints performance last week was not just an anomaly.
Yeah, Judah, over to you on this one. You were big on the Saints last week against the Eagles in that spot, saying the market hadn't quite reacted enough, I guess, or there was upside to perhaps backing the Saints on the alt line. It's only a week, so it's important. It was only a small sample size, I guess, last week's disappointment. You're going in again on the Saints alt side. So I guess it's alternatives there for you. So you're Saints minus 5.5. Sorry, I thought you were shaking your head when I looked, so I had to double check. You were Saints.
No. I'm going. If it's
you're shaking your head at yourself.
It's a good guess. I feel like that's what I'm going to be going with. But yeah, I think kind of exactly what I led with. I'm not going to overreact to one game. I think that obviously, the name of the game is balancing the sample sizes. I think the process of the Saints running a ton of play action, a ton of motion, this ability to mitigate quick pressure. They've allowed the least amount of quick pressure in the NFL so far. I don't think that's because their offensive line magically got better. I think there are schematic elements, and players have certainly talked about this. Micah Parsons was continually talking about how they were blocking him in the funkiest ways. They were running counters, like a rush play, as if they were going to block him, whatever, a bunch of kind of funky schematic stuff here. I think kind of the narrative is okay, we thought the Saints were going to be bad. They had 2 really great games. We were who we thought they were, and just immediately downgraded as if I think that was just a much flukier style. The Eagles controlled the ball for a very long time. It was a particular game script. And there's a lot of talk right now about the injuries to the Saints offensive line. Number one, I think that matters less to the Saints than it would another team. I don't think that Cesar Ruiz went from being one of the worst guards in the NFL for 4 years to having a terrific season this year by virtue of him magically getting better. You can say that across the Saints offensive line. Their starting center now in PFF grades is 3rd in the NFL after 6 seasons as a journeyman in the bottom quartile, probably 10th percentile. I don't think that's them magically getting better. I think it's a function of the coaching and the scheme. And on Doug's point, Jalen Carter had the game of his life last week. I don't think it's a matter of being able to kind of copy what the Eagles did. A great player had an incredible game, and it was a 99th percentile game. There's no one on the Falcons that has that capability. So you kind of add it up, and you have a Falcons team, which I think is by basically all efficiency metrics, kind of average on offense and defense. The Saints, if you look at all efficiency metrics on both sides, are in this clear tier 2 behind the Bills. I want to trust that sample. And the Falcons, where they've especially struggled, is their pass rush. They have generated, I think it's the 4th least quick pressure, any kind of measure of pass rush that you want to use. They will fall at the bottom of the league. And Derek Carr for years now, and certainly this year, has some of the biggest splits pressure versus not. His expected points added when not facing quick pressure is 2nd in the NFL so far this season, and he is 4th worst when facing quick pressure. I just see this as a spot that the Falcons do not have the pass rush to kind of take advantage of where Carr is weak, and the market is just aggressively selling the Saints starts and really kind of relying on that week 3 game as opposed to the full 3 game sample that we have so far.
Yeah, okay, I wonder. I think, this has a high variance. We talked about sort of the motivation of teams. Just think about what Atlanta's gone through the last couple of weeks in terms of the Monday night primetime game, the energy expent, the comeback, and then to have the Chiefs, the 2-time defending champs, on Sunday Night Football at home, face of the league, have this dramatic ending. You just wonder what's left in the gas tank. I wouldn't be shocked at all if there was an egg laid by Atlanta.
Okay, yeah. So Doug's playing the under 42.5, 193, and Judah making the case for the alternative spread once again. Saints minus 5.5 at around 11-4, 3.75. And let's move on to the second game, which is Commanders at the Cardinals. Latest betting on matchbook.com sees Commanders 264 underdogs to the Cardinals, who are 157. Commanders getting a 3.5 head start, and the total is 50.0. I'll throw this back at you, Judah, and you lean towards the Cardinals. First of all, I picked out this game. It's not necessarily two Super Bowl contenders, but two entertaining teams to watch, I would say.
Yeah, I think that I'll go a little bit off script here. I think I like the over, even though it's still 50.5. I think these are two of the most explosive offenses in the league and some of the worst defenses in the league. And I think with Jaden Daniels in particular, he's obviously had terrific production. There's no denying that, and this offense has worked really well. And I think the kind of threat of his ability to run has also really gotten the run game going, which I think is certainly a surprise. But I also think that Jaden Daniels is going to be a quarterback that is very sensitive to pressure. And he was good against the Giants in week 2, but he took a ton of sacks. And he is a high variance player like that, where if he's kept clean, I think he's going to produce. And if he is under pressure, he is going to struggle a bit. He's going to take some sacks. They're going to stall some drives. I don't think they're going to be able to keep up the kind of late down production that they've had early in the season. All of that is to say, the Cardinals are not the pass rush that's going to kind of force Jaden Daniels into the area that he's weak. They should, I think, have no problem sustaining drives as they have had the first 3 weeks. And on the Arizona side, this is a Washington defense that is just bleeding pass production, and the Cardinals did not run the ball particularly well last week. I think that will change. I don't really see any game script other than just like teams will settle for field goals and that sort of thing happens. That doesn't say this should be one of the highest scoring games, really, of any teams. The Commanders also play with a ton of pace. They're one of the fastest teams in the NFL. The Cardinals themselves are not far behind. You got quick offenses, explosive offenses against some of the worst defenses in the NFL. I think this sets up as like if you were projecting two teams to have an extremely high total, these might be the best combo. The game's in a dome that matters on the margins here. I don't think 50.5 is the right number for these two teams.
Okay, lean over perhaps for Judah and Doug. Commanders, I mean, Monday Night Football, it was sensational performance offensively. Didn't the game feature the first time there was no turnovers or punts in an NFL game in history? That's insane to me when they said that on commentary.
Yeah, and Washington hasn't punted in 2 games. And in fact, this team would be 3-0 to the over if the Giants had a kicker at all. So the fact that Judah's talking about the over, that's the only way I would play the total. I mean, it almost looks too easy just because of how Arizona operates. I'll say this: eventually there'll be some regression with Washington, but I just don't think that Arizona defense is the one to do it. I think Washington can build off last week and continue to play. And when you have that dual threat in Daniels, like he's just going to make plays on third down, and he has weapons, right? As opposed to Caleb Williams, who doesn't have an offensive line, or they're finally got their offense going. But I think Daniels is what we kind of expected, but 3.5 feels like a big number. I do like Arizona at home. I talked about it a couple weeks ago when they played the Rams, but that was a horrible spot for the Rams. They had a mash unit, all the injuries mounting. They were off that overtime game against the Lions. Like the Cardinals are going to come back to earth like we saw last week with the Lions. I think the Commanders getting that extra half point, in pick 'em leagues and everything, that's the only way you can play it. I couldn't lay it either.
Okay, so lean for the over and perhaps lean to Commanders plus 3.5. No outstanding bet though from the guys. So we'll move on to Sunday Night Football. Bills at the Ravens, and we'll take a look at the betting or on matchbook.com. Bills 2.12, Ravens 183. I mean, the point spread sees Bills get a 1.5 head start, and the total is in and around 46.0. Doug, I'll throw this back at you. I mean, are Bills probably the team that's probably shown the most looking at a Super Bowl outright in terms of the first 3 weeks of the season, or at least being the most consistent with their performances?
Yeah, I'd say so too. And then Josh Allen at some books became the MVP betting favorite, right? At plus 200, which is just insane, leapfrogging Mahomes. They absolutely have looked polished, put together, and really it's the scariest for opposing defense because Allen can spread the ball around like he did on Monday against Jacksonville. And maybe removing Stephon Diggs, who was chirping as a wide receiver, that Allen had to pacify him and then worry about now he can just play ball. And whatever the defense gives him, if he has to run, he can do that. If he can distribute it, he can do that. Things are in a groove. But, we've seen it in years. 1 seeds, peak too early. I'll keep reminding everyone, Philly last year, 10-1 or whatever it was to start the year, didn't even win the division. But Buffalo certainly looks like the complete package. We'll see about their defense, but Josh Allen's playing at an elite level right now. However, I think Baltimore's, tough at home, all that stuff. But I lean to the Ravens, but I am apprehensive just assuming those offensive line issues have been cured. Yes, when they were down 0-2 and went to Dallas, that was their biggest game of the year, basically. They had to avoid 0-3. So what do we see this week against a Buffalo squad that seems to be humming? But I think it's going to be an awesome game. But I lean to Baltimore, but typically they're not at their best in the favorite role or anything along those lines.
Okay, yeah, Judah, over to you. You're backing the Bills here. I mean, is this a strong, confident play?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I feel like you just gave a bunch of reasons to like the Bills, and we're like, hey, I'm going to go on the Ravens. Yeah. But I'm going to pick up on that. I think that this works in both sides. Number one, the Bills are again, it's 3 weeks. Like, you don't want to kind of weigh too much, but I think it's a little bit different when you have a much larger sample of the Bills and Josh Allen as being a great team. That I'm much quicker to upgrade a Bills team than I would, I don't know, some other team that's been mediocre for a bunch of years with a similar supporting cast and turned out to put out elite production. But at the end of the day, like, the Bills have been one of the best teams in the NFL. I think Josh Allen is far and away the MVP through 3 weeks. I don't think he will sustain the level of production. You're not going to score 47 points every game, but I do think directionally is true, and there's like little reason to think that this team won't be a top, if not the best offense in the NFL. And this is a Ravens team that, we talked about it a couple of times now. I think this defense especially is overrated, and I don't think the market's kind of quite caught up to the loss of Mike McDonald and what he's done. This is a team that's got the 4th lowest pressure rate. They are allowing a top 5 rate of explosive plays. That's not exactly a recipe for success against Josh Allen. And, like, of course, anything can happen in any given game, but there's little reason, I think, on the Ravens side to say that this matchup in particular is going to slow down the Bills. I think you just kind of got to bet on random regression, which obviously can happen, but it's not something that I want to do. And on the flip side, one of the most surprising parts of the Bills season thus far, I think, is how good their pass rush has been. They, for years now, have basically designed their offense to limit explosive plays. They've been the best at that in the NFL over the last bunch of years, but they kind of struggled to get to the quarterback quick. And like Von Miller's turned back the clock to 2012 or something. He's done a terrific job generating pressure. They're top 10 in most of those metrics. And the Ravens offensive line can't pass protect. Lamar Jackson's done an incredible job scrambling, and sure, he can play hero ball, and the Ravens can win. And it's possible that the Ravens just get their run game going and kind of play from ahead the entire time and play a much slower game. That isn't to say there aren't pathways, but I think when you just think about what's most likely to happen here, I see this as a spot where the Bills are so far and away the better team and have the matchup advantages as well.
Okay, so strong bet there from Judah. Bills are around 2.2 on the money line, so we'll lock that in, and a lean from Doug on the Ravens, and move on to Monday Night Football. We will be covering a lot of the red zone games, incidentally, in our any other bets section, but this is the current prices that we have at matchbook.com for Seahawks at the Lions Monday Night Football. This is the main Monday Night Football. There's confusion there. There'll be 2 games once again this Monday night. Seahawks 266, underdogs to the Lions who are 157. Seahawks getting a 3.5 head start. 46 is the total. Judah, you're leaning towards the Seahawks. I mean, what a start for them, I guess. I mean, how far can this team go? Can they go into Detroit here and get a victory?
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. I think much of the kind of criticism leveled against, or I shouldn't say criticism, but some of the warning signs against Seattle's, especially their defensive production, is that they played a bunch of bad quarterbacks. It was Bo Nix, Jacoby Brissett, and last week going against Skylar Thompson. But good teams should absolutely bury bad offenses, and that's exactly what Seattle's done. And they're dealing with some injuries on the defensive line, and that, of course, matters. But I also think it matters less to a team like Seattle, where so much of their pressure has come from these schemed pressures. It is no coincidence that the Baltimore Ravens, who had no player with a top 100, pass rush win rate. That is, like, if you took 4 seasons and took all of the win rates. So like some guy can have 4 seasons in there. There was no one in the top 100 for the Ravens last season, and yet they generated top 10 pressure. This season, with basically the same cast except losing Jadeveon Clowney, again, they're like 4th lowest in pressure. That's not a coincidence. I think that is a function of Mike Macdonald's scheme. So with that prior, you can kind of say, like, I think this is a pretty good defense. The offense, I think I have some concerns. They're not really running much play action at all. They're operating an entirely different offense. Geno Smith's time to throw has gone from 2.8 seconds to 2.5 seconds. I think they're just trying to get it out quick and eliminate the mistakes, which leaves some room to be desired. And I have some concerns on the offensive side, but I think this defense is legit. I don't think they're going to be the number 1 overall defense or number 2 right now through 3 weeks. It's them or the Vikings, but I think it is directionally accurate. And this is a legit defense. And the Lions have some concerns. That isn't to say that they can't find the success, but through a bunch of weeks, like, Jared Goff has not been good. The areas where he's been so good is on plays where he's not disrupted, where there isn't great coverage, or where the pressure is not kind of stopping him from being able to go through his reads. And on those plays where in 2022 and 2023, he was 2nd and 3rd best in EPA, or basically any efficiency metric you want to look at, he's 26th thus far this season. Is it a small sample? Yes. Do I want to believe that they will return to form? Yes, but it also hasn't happened yet. And I think there's some concerns, and they ran the ball great against Arizona, but I'm a little bit concerned that they haven't been able to put the passing offense together. So it's just a lean for me, because I still want to weight that prior at the Lions offense. It would not be shocking at all for them to find the form they've had for the last 2 years. It's effectively the same cast of characters. But I also want to be sensitive to what we've seen on the field and not rely too much on that production. And I think this Seahawks defense is underrated. So a lean for me, just looking at how the market's pricing these things, but not something I'm going to be betting.
Okay, lean for the Seahawks there, outlining that despite the quarterbacks they played, they've dealt with them well. Doug, on the other side with the Lions, have you been? I guess it's been a disappointment from where people expected their level of performance to be after last year's playoff run.
No doubt. And I'm going to contradict myself a little bit as well in this game, because I said last week that certain teams have to learn how to play with success. Kind of goes to what I was saying earlier about my week 3 takeaways. I'm impressed with the Chiefs because they get everyone's best shot and they continue to deliver. And some, obviously, they'll catch some breaks or they'll lose outright here and there. They don't go 17-0. I get it. But these young teams need to learn how to play with success. And the Lions, off a loss last week, won and covered. They've won and covered 9 straight over the last couple seasons off an outright loss, because when you get hit in the mouth and you lose, they know how to prepare and come to prepare the next week, all week in practice, and it shows on the field. The question is, off a win, can they deliver? And I think, the loss is fresh in their minds and the Monday night component to this, but you also have to respect the market. And the market is sitting there at 3.5 for a reason. And it feels like this line should be 5, 5.5, 6 because of the Lions power rating. But the market has reacted to Seattle, and Judah mentioned those quarterbacks. I mean, yes, they pummeled them and they took care of their business. What more do you want the Seattle team to do? So this will be a nice litmus test and measuring stick for what this Seahawks team, and you wonder, maybe they're just fresh because they've had not the toughest games, and they've been playing at home, and their only road game was at New England. I mean, and they had to go to overtime. So I'm very curious to evaluate these teams after this game. I think it should be a really good one. The main card of Monday night, if you will, not the undercard. The other game's the undercard. Yeah. So this should be an awesome game. But I'm on the favorite here. But I'd almost like it more if it was -5.5. I think the fact that it's 3.5, it's telling you something. Just like, go easy on this one.
Yeah. No, I hear you. That's Doug going for Lions minus 4.0, and Judah no bet, but is a lean towards the Seahawks and outline in that case. Well, we'll move on to any other bets, and this is when we get the red zone bets, and there is agreement with the guys we'll get to in just a sec. Judah, we'll start with you for the Vikings money line. This is a big game now. I wanted this to be one of the marquee games, Vikings at Packers, for obvious reasons, but take it away here. It looks like Jordan Love will be, or is at least priced to be playing this weekend.
Yeah, so it's an interesting spot because Jordan Love, as it were, was having a lot of trouble scrambling. And he kind of like stopped doing it over the second half of the season. I think that obviously is magnified in this matchup. And this is a Minnesota defense that's going to be sending the blitz. They're going to be able to generate pressure. And the Packers have kind of done a good job over the last bunch of years mitigating that. But I'm not sure, given Love's inability to scramble, whether that will continue in this spot. And I just don't think the market's given enough respect to the Vikings. I mean, what more can they have done at this point? The defense looks great. The offense, it's kind of hard to ignore that, like, they are, whether it's scheme or whatever the reason is, they've put out great production. They haven't done it against like cakewalk teams. They're legit. And I think that the Packers have still plenty of concerns. Even the like week 2 win against the Colts was like exceptionally fluky. It was a ridiculous game script. I'm not willing to kind of say we know so much about them. And I think Love's injury also presents a bunch of uncertainty. And the defense has struggled. I mean, their run defense has been towards the middle of the pack, I guess. That the pass defense has not been much better, and they haven't really been tested outside of Jalen Hurts in week 1. I think the Vikings present a completely different matchup and one that should be able to have some success. I just don't think the market's giving the Vikings enough respect. I'm not willing to say they're the best team in the NFL, but given the state of there's a lot of uncertainty about how healthy Jordan Love is. This is a major injury that he's coming back soon after that. I think that the Vikings are slightly mispriced on the money line here.
Okay, Doug. So what more could the Vikings do to get your trust and not back the Packers here, laying 2.5?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I agree, because I was on them last week. I was on them against the Niners. I thought they were very legitimate, and they pummeled the Giants, and then they took care of business against what we think are pretty solid teams. And I think the Packers team it hasn't been rated properly. I do agree. You got to throw out the game where it was like a high school game where they ran the option or whatever with Malik Willis. But this is a team and a defense that can get out. I think Darnold's going to have some trouble here with lacking mobility. I think the Packers D is going to put a lot of pressure on them. And Green Bay, I think, is much better than people realize as well. I think both teams are. I think this division is going to be very solid the rest of the year. But I'm going to roll with the Packers here. I think they're finding ways to win. I think the fact that they've had such a wide range of game script and performance is going to keep Minnesota's preparation sort of off balance, whether it's Love or whatnot. So I have a lot of respect for this Packers coaching staff. I do the Vikings as well, but I think the Packers eke out a win. As long as it's under 3, I'm okay there.
Okay, so that's minus 2.5 Packers for Doug, and Judah going for Vikings on money line 2.28. So difference of opinion in that game. And Doug, we'll go back to you. Bears versus the Rams here. I mean, look, what more can we say about the Rams? There's potential in that team. I mean, hit with a lot of injuries. You're going to lay Bears with 3 here at around even money.
Yeah, I'm encouraged last week with the performance of the Bears offense. Just Caleb Williams finally getting some stats and getting the offense going. The question is, can that offense line do enough? But I think this Bears defense is pretty solid. I think we've overlooked now. I think they should have been blown out on that Sunday night against the Texans, but that was more offensive ineptitude. But everything broke right in the last game for the Rams. Obviously, they had no business winning that. McVay was the difference maker in that game. He kind of knows the San Francisco personnel pretty well, just the division. I'm obviously concerned a little bit with the coaching mismatch here with McVay and the Bears staff. But I think the Bears are going to dictate this, and I think their defense is much better than people realize, and the injuries just mounting up for LA is just too much.
Okay, that's Bears minus 3, even money against the Rams. Judah, you both agree on this selection here. So it's the Bengals laying -4. This market's moved back from, I think, 5.5, 6 to 5, 4.5, 4. I mean, is the momentum's with the Panthers here, but you saw enough of that Bengals offense, I'm guessing, that is making you bet them here.
Yeah, I think the Bengals offense looks as certainly better than it was at any point last season, even if the win-loss results have not shown up yet. And like I had some concerns about Burrow's injuries and whatnot, but from an efficiency standpoint, they've been a top 5 offense in basically any category you want to use. And this is still a really bad Panthers defense. And I don't think that a win against Vegas changes much there. And like Andy Dalton had an incredible game, absolutely, no doubt about that. But I also think that was kind of that was within the range of outcomes, and it was further along kind of the right side of the distribution. I don't think we learned anything new about Andy Dalton. He's a fine quarterback. I think the market has kind of moved a little bit too aggressively to last week's game. The Bengals are in a completely different tier of offense than the Panthers are. The Bengals defense is not great. They struggle to generate pressure. They allow a bunch of explosive plays, but these two teams are not remotely in the same tier. And I think there's a little bit too much of an overreaction to each of the past few games and certainly the Bengals record.
Anything to add there, Doug?
Yeah, I echo everything. The offense is not the issue. It's the defense. And can Carolina really repeat what they saw last? Antonio Pierce, let's give credit to what he said. He saw guys quitting and things along those lines. So that clearly is more of a knock on the Raiders than it is a bonus on Carolina. And Andy Dalton, if you give him time to throw and all that stuff, he's going to hit open guys, right? It's one thing Bryce Young was unable to do. But aside from that, this guy's not the world's best athlete and playmaker. He's been a statue back there for a few years. He has struggled. I think Cincinnati can put enough pressure on him. And there was a connection there with Thielen, who's now on IR. So let's not overlook that. And then they're a thin roster. This Carolina team has needed more than a new quarterback. I mean, and it's a desperation game, right? It's a desperation game for the Bengals. At some point, the human element you have to factor in. Like, their season's on the line here, and the offense is clicking. It's not like they have a lot of problems to resolve. They just need to go play their game, and the defense has to do enough for this team to cover the 4.
Okay, yeah, fascinating what happens, but also fascinating where that market ends up if it even can get to 3.5, 3, surely not. But both guys in agreement, Bengals -4, 196. So you give a couple of more. Any other bets? Start with the Chiefs at my Chargers. I mean, Chargers came back crashing down to earth last week, 2-1 now against this divisional matchup here. I mean, the Chargers have an appalling record against the Chiefs. I mean, honestly, we just keep losing to them, basically.
Yeah, I'm a little uneasy with all the chalk I like this weekend, but I think this is one of those weeks where the public bounces back. You just see the headlines. Public bounces back. Yeah, because they're good for about 3 weeks a season. So I think this is the first one. The Chargers have a bye on deck. Herbert is banged up. He should not play. I mean, let's be honest, but Harbaugh's kind of crazy. So I can see him allowing it and things like that. And, you respect to Herbert for wanting to play through injury. So I do expect him to play, but you saw what happened last week against the Steelers. He got banged up, and then they sort of unraveled, especially with the offensive line issues. They have question marks both at right tackle and left tackle. Joe Alt's definitely out. And the Chargers offense is kind of a mess. And the pass rush of Kansas City is a strength. So as much as I respect and love Herbert, I also think this Chargers team's a little overrated, facing Minshew, Bryce Young, and Justin Fields, who certainly has limitations. He has mobility, but he also played a great game last week. And I think the Chiefs are in for it. And let's say Herbert is scratched. You're going to get great line value with KC, but I think the Chiefs, this could be where they sort of get right and have a blowout win.
Okay, yeah. And finally, the Dolphins lane 1 versus the Titans.
Yeah, the undercard, right, on Monday night.
Yeah.
I did not take the bait on the Titans the first 2 weeks, so I did not suffer the bad beat against the Bears, and the Jets was kind of a bad beat or whatever. It could have gone their way. I was on them last week, and that was definitely not a bad beat. That was a beat down. But I think the mobility of Huntley will buy time for those speedy wide receivers to get open. I think Miami can do enough to win this game. Not that it's one of those games where the line can't be much higher. given, the quarterback situation for the Dolphins, but I think they're going to look a lot better than we saw last week. And I think Skylar Thompson's terrible. So as long as they're going with a more mobile quarterback, I think they can do enough. And sometimes coaches, like we saw this with LaFleur and Malik Willis, sometimes they like this challenge. McVay had Baker Mayfield 2 years ago at the end of the season. It's kind of like their chance to sort of play with wild cards and kind of show their creativity. I bet you McDaniel does some good stuff with Huntley, and they keep this Titans team off balance because Will Levis is a mess, and there's no relief in sight for that offense right now.
Okay, plenty thrown at you there. A lot of red zone bets there, a lot of Monday night football bets. Insights on matchbook.com, full recap of all the bets, particularly around red zone if you want to just see what the guys are picking and maybe want to do a multiple or two on matchbook. I mean, a couple of interesting, they're always interesting, the long shots. Well done to Judah. The Giants money line was never in doubt. In fairness, it was a pretty decent performance overall. I mean, let's move on to two teams, Judah, that got absolutely battered last weekend. Where do we start with the Jags at Texans?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Jags, a story as old as time for me, I guess. But I think that this works in both directions. I think that there are some concerning signs for the Texans. And I certainly missed their Texans last year and absolutely loved CJ Stroud from early on and Bobby Slowick. But this is a team that is forcing some of the fewest coverage mistakes in the NFL. CJ Stroud has taken a whole bunch of sacks, a lot of 3-and-outs. This is not the offense so far that it's kind of been built. And I think that especially the coverage stuff matters a bit more because I think it means they won't be as effective in taking advantage of the matchup against the Jaguars defense because they themselves are kind of forcing their own mistakes. And I think that's a problem. On the flip side, the Jaguars have been bad. There's no way around it. Trevor Lawrence has some seriously concerning signs. He's holding the ball a lot longer. He's taking a bunch more sacks, but one area where he has been terrific is in throwing the deep ball, and that's an area where the Texans have struggled over the last couple of years in this scheme. They allow the second highest depth of throw. They're a bottom team in preventing explosive plays, and that's kind of what you need when you're betting on a big underdog. And I think that you just get a couple of these deep shots, which the Jaguars certainly want to take, and that can kind of flip the script here a bit. I think that not that much needs to go right for the Jaguars here to kind of upset the Texans.
Okay, that's 3.25 money line at the Texans. I think that's quite a decent price for what it's worth. Doug, let's get on some of these alt lines and really go for it. I mean, the Niners, there is upside, and there is a lot of scenarios where they ended up beating the Patriots by a fair margin this weekend.
Yeah, this feels like the second slate of games, the afternoon slot, where this Niners game just is getting away, and you kind of check out and go back and focus on the games that are a little bit closer. I think the Patriots are coming back to where we thought they were. That opening week win was fluky. I think Cincinnati fumbled twice inside the 5, and we know the Bengals have been slow starters as well. And then the real Patriots stood up, although I thought they played well against the Seahawks, all things considered, at home. And then the feeble effort against the Jets. But when Aaron Rodgers plays like that, it's really hard when you don't have the horses. And the issue with New England, and this is probably the last week Jacoby Brissett starts, is they can't play from behind. They just don't have the weapons. Their defense isn't that good. They've had some injuries as well on D. I think they're going to end up being the worst team as well. Carolina or New England, it's going to be one of those two teams in my eyes. And I think it's probably going to be New England. And the Niners got to get right. I think they have the home. They're, coming off the situation. They're 1-2. They can't mess around. Maybe they get a little healthier. But the thing with Shanahan, and the reason I want to lay the 20.5 alt line is when he has a lead, he throws downfield. And we saw that with the Jets and things like that. They don't just go power eye and turn it over to their defense. He puts Purdy on the move, rollouts, and Purdy's obviously looking more and more comfortable in this offense. I believe he's second in the NFL in passing yards. So I have faith in Purdy and them to kind of stretch it out and New England to sort of fold here.
Okay, and moving on to best bets, that will be your best bet on the card as well. So you're doubling up your long shots and best bets, which has been attempted once or twice in the Matchbook NFL podcast, and I can promise you not with success. So best of luck with this.
Well, you got to roll the dice, right? You got to press when you think you have something. But I do think 10's a cheap number. I have a feeling this will be 12.5, 13 once after the games get going on Sunday and right closer to kickoff. I think they're going to get. I think they're only going to get one-way traffic on this game.
Yeah, okay. And 9 could be a popular bet come Sunday. And Judah, final word to you. I mean, it's a game you made a really good case for the Bills, but look, let's get some alt money. Let's get some value for money and laying 5.5 here at the Ravens. If you think they're going to win, you think they could. There is a scenario where they win this by a touchdown or something in and around that.
Yeah, I don't think this needs to be kind of overly complex. It's like if the Bills are 90% of what they've done production wise over the first 3 weeks of the season, this game is completely mispriced, obviously, and it's also a team that can win with margin. Right, points are not just a reflection of fundamental value, but real points in real games. And if this is a Bills offense that's going to be putting up 30 points consistently, it's pretty easy to win with margin in the NFL when you're scoring 30 points. And this is a defense that I think kind of plays into the strengths of the Ravens, at least from the passing game. The Ravens have a lot of success kind of utilizing the run game and throwing vertically. That's a lot of the Todd Monken offense. And if they get into a game script where they're playing from ahead and the Ravens can't rely on a run, I see this as a spot where Buffalo can really frown on them.
Okay, yeah, quite excited from that. As I've been saying throughout the show, insights.matchbook.com, full recap of all the guys' picks. That'll be available from Friday morning. Really excited for NFL this week. That was a fun one from Doug, Judah. Plenty of as Doug said, sorry, let's hope the public bounce back and let's lay a lot of favorites and hopefully it's one of the public's weeks. But hit that like button, follow and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. And please God, we'll be back this time next week to preview week 5. Enjoy the weekend's football, enjoy Red Zone. We'll chat to you next week. Bye-bye.